Today's episode is brought to you by Sports Business Classroom. Landing a job in the NBA is no easy feat. One surefire way to put yourself in front of a competitive talent pool is if you master the collective bargaining agreement. And now you can, with a course developed by the godfather of the CBA himself, Larry Kuhn. Larry Kuhn has been teaching the CBA to teams, agents, media, and students for over 20 years, and now you can master the CBA through his online video on-demand course, which is now available to the public. If you're looking to break into basketball or even just set yourself apart, this is the competitive advantage you are looking for. To learn more about the video on-demand course that is being taken by teams and agents all over the world, please visit sportsbusinessclassroom.com today.
Well, welcome back, ladies and gents. You are listening to the NTC podcast. This is Aaron Washington. My co-host John is back on with me. We're glad to be back with you guys on the mic. It's been a hot minute, honestly, but the NBA world is blowing up right now. There's so many great storylines that we want to discuss. So we're glad to be back in the studio, so to speak, ready to dive into these incredible storylines. We have Ja going off for 50. We have Tatum going for 50. LeBron going for 50. The Eastern Conference playoff race is heating up. There's so many different highlights as we get into the last fourth of the season that we want to cover. So excited to be back in here. John, just to kind of kick things off, man, what have you been kind of keeping your eye on? I know you've been in MSG. You've been watching some of the stuff in person. Like, what kind of like stands out to you initially as we dive into this podcast as far as like one or a few things that you really are just enjoying right now as the NBA season gets into its like prime playoff push period?
I mean, the individual performances have been incredible thinking about all that. I mean, you just listed off how many people have had 50-point games in like the last week. I want to throw, you mentioned MSG. I want to throw in that RJ Barrett did have 46. So the Knicks had one bright spot. Other than that, I've been more watching other teams and other players have these great moments. And it's been great. We're seeing a lot of teams. We'll talk about it too on the show, whether it's from the trade deadline that they got better, or they're having guys that have come in and are playing out of their minds. Or we're talking about teams that maybe aren't winning a lot of games that are going to get to that might get to that point soon. And we still should pay attention to them because they're next up. So many different storylines where it's either teams that are winning a lot of games and even teams that are losing a lot of games are still interesting to talk about. So we have a lot to dive into on this show. It's going to be a fun one for sure because there's never been such a competitive scoring title race, an MVP race, a competitive 8, 9, 10 seed push now with the play-in tournament, kind of being a mainstay of the season and really us being all used to it now. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Dude, 100%, John. I mean, one thing I want to highlight as you talked about all those different storylines is the fact that there's so much to cover. There's so much like just happening and going on throughout this season. This is the best time, honestly, to tune in. I think for someone, I even consider myself in this category. If you've been kind of out of touch here and there with following the NBA, I think now is the perfect time to dive in head first because, John, like you mentioned, I mean, the playoff race is heating up, the MVP race, the award races. Coach of the year, like I'll throw out another one. I think Coach of the year is going to be an insanely close race. There's 5-6 guys off the top of my head that are clearly contenders for that award. But without further ado, let's get into it. I know there's so much we can discuss, but let's try to break it down one step at a time, without kind of overwhelming ourselves, which I know is hard to do with everything that's going on. So this is episode 24, everybody, and we're going to dive right in, starting with this topic of the MVP race so far. So, John, we have about, give or take, maybe 16, 17, 18 games left, depending on which team you're thinking about left in the season. To this point, I think the top three is clear. But after that, there's some guys you can definitely throw in for honorable mentions. For me, Jokic, Embiid, and Giannis. From pretty much the start of the season, as soon as the gun was fired, they got going. They're immediately dominant. Embiid missed a little bit of time way back in the beginning of the season, but ever since he came back, he's been an absolute behemoth, been incredible, a great two-way presence as well as Giannis. Jokic's numbers, though, are mind-blowing. I mean, he's at 25 points a game, 13 rebounds, almost 8 assists, along with great shooting percentages. I mean, he's shooting almost 36% from three, a great free throw percentage, solid field goal percentage, 56%. So you go across the board, I think the only way to really kind of differentiate these guys as far as where they rank is look at their team success. For Jokic, he's been a little bit handicapped. He's missing his two best co-stars. But for the other two guys, I mean, it's been an incredible ride, and they're both near the top of the conference, looking at Giannis and Embiid. So, I mean, do you have any disputes with that top three, or are you kind of in the same boat as far as like who leads the race at this point in time?
I would have to agree with a lot of those statements. I mean, it really does come down to all those factors. And every year, we always come into the discussion of, well, what does MVP really mean? And whatever it truly means, right, it being most valuable player award, we have to look at just who night in and night out is really putting their team on their back and really doing that. I think that's kind of the easiest way to decide it is who's consistently putting up numbers where we're all looking at that going, wow, like he's doing that again and again and again and again. And of course, stats don't mean the whole thing, but what Jokic is doing with what he's had to deal with, and sure, Embiid was missing Simmons for the entire year, and there was so much drama going on there, and there's been a monster trade that they're adjusting really well to, and sure, he, as a star player, you need to be accommodating to let that be so smooth, which he has been. So nothing against Embiid, but Jokic's season right now, whether any advanced stats, whether you're looking at what he's had to deal with, it's not like he's surrounded by all-stars and like he has it easy. He's really putting up these crazy numbers under circumstances where his team needs him to put those numbers, or else they're not winning games. So even though he hasn't won as many games as Embiid, or his seeding isn't as nice as Embiid being the 2 seed in the East and he's the 6 seed in the West, their win total is very close to almost the same. The Sixers have 39 wins, and the Nuggets, as of today, have 37 wins. So it really isn't like that much of a. If it was like a 1 seed versus 8 seed kind of thing, I could definitely understand where that's coming from. But the fact that they're so close in wins, and we have no idea what's going to happen now. And we'll talk about this later, when some of those pieces that Embiid, Jokic really needs are coming back. It's going to be really scary for teams seeing the Nuggets, and I don't think you want to see the Nuggets as a 6 seed. So even if their seeding says that, they're not really a 6 seed. They're a lot better than that. And Jokic is a big reason why.
True that. I'm glad you brought up the topic of how close these teams are. I guess really thinking about it, even wins is not a great differentiator because, the Sixers and Bucks are virtually tied. Technically, the Sixers as of today are a half game ahead, but that's because they have one less loss. They've played one less game, so there's that. But ultimately, across the board, these guys, their impact has been felt. And you bring up a great point as far as how do we really define MVP? And for different people, it's really different. Basically, I guess it's not really MVP in the pure sense of what that term is. It's really just player of the year. Maybe we should change that title to player of the year. I've heard some people kind of advocate for that. But, whatever the case is, these guys have been amazing. But, these are waters that have been, covered already. What I really am interested in looking at is the next 3 players. And these 3 guys, I think, all have a case, at least, for being in the top 3. But, Jokic, Embiid, Giannis has just been so good. But the next 3 for me are John Morant, DeMar DeRozan, and Luka. Have all made the huge push, in the past month or so. They've been absolutely incredible for their teams. And you go look at the standings, it's the same thing. Right before we went on the air, me and John were discussing the fact that as of last night, the Grizzlies were number 2 in the Western Conference. Go ask anybody, maybe not Grizzlies fans. Maybe they thought that they'd be at this spot right now in the season. You ask anybody else, no one's going to say that through 3 quarters of the season, the Grizzlies are 44-21. Just absolutely incredible. John Morant, up there in the top 5 in scoring in the league. Nobody would say that going in, but these guys have been absolutely incredible. Same for DeRozan. They've slept a little bit lately, but they are missing a couple other key pieces. We're going to get to them a little bit later. And then same for Luka. He's been on an incredible tear, triple doubles all over the place, making records as far as what he's doing at his age is unprecedented. Only guys like LeBron are in that category so far. And then you look at the records. Dallas at 39 wins, the Bulls at 39 wins. There's a bunch of people at 39 wins. That's really insane. And then you look at Ja and them at 44 wins. So really incredible. John, I don't know if I left anybody out. If I did, I apologize. But those are the 3 guys off the top of my head. The next 3, the honorable mentions, guys that have a case for being in the top 3. It's just the race is so stacked. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. There's so many great names, deserving names to this point. And, no matter who gets picked, I don't think there's going to be a wrong choice because all these guys have been incredible. They're having historic seasons, really kind of in their own ways, honestly, when you really dive into the numbers.
Definitely. And I think that everyone always gets caught up in that top 2, top 3 of the MVP race. But the other numbers when looking at all-time rankings, I like to a lot of times look at where did this guy end up in the MVP race when he didn't win, right? Was he top 5? Was he in the top 7? Because that's actually a really interesting kind of barometer as to what were some of the big storylines that season, who played really, really well. Obviously, on top of all NBA teams, stuff like that, the other rankings in the MVP race are really important too. Of those 3 names you mentioned, obviously they all deserve to be there, and I don't see anyone else kind of cracking that. But I think John Morant is just a step above the other 2. I'm sure Luka Doncic and of course DeMar DeRozan has been playing great this season. The Bulls, the one thing that automatically to me just makes me really uneasy to kind of go, really be as high on them as other people are, is that they're 1-13 against the other top 7 teams.
Glad you brought that up.
That's a stat that to me is like, and the scary thing to me is like, if we know this stuff as fans, the coaches staff definitely does, the players definitely do, right? They're all very smart. They all really follow this stuff, a lot. So it's not like they don't know this. And if I was them, I'd be okay. Well, we're gonna make sure we win. Like, no rest days on this game against the top 10 team, because we need to prove that we can compete with these guys. And they're still losing these games. So, I mean, when I saw these stats early and it was like 1-8 or whatever it was, 0-7, I was okay. Like, it's a fluke. Okay. Like, whatever. But as it keeps on building and building, I'm starting to think, well, maybe this team isn't, they're beating up on all the teams that they should be beating, but they're losing to everyone that they need to beat to actually be a good team. Right. So that's something that's really concerning. And if you're an MVP, that doesn't happen on your watch. That's for sure. Looking at Luka, of course, putting up great numbers for his age and stuff. His time is definitely going to come. But Ja's and Luka's done it too. Ja's really arrived in a way that he is must watch. He's making news. He's elevating a team without much help around him to heights. And we said top 2 in the West, which is true, but they're top 2 in the league as a whole. I'm obviously really close with the Heat and the Warriors, just half a game or a game behind them. But as of right now, as of today, they're number 2 in the entire league, with the Suns way ahead in that 1 seed. But really, I mean, Memphis being there is unheard of. The Mavs, people thought they were going to be good. The Bulls, they had a nice free agency. Everyone thought they were pretty good. The Memphis Grizzlies were supposed to be fighting for a play-in seed. Really, for the most part, a playing seed, maybe like a 7-8, but they'll still be in the playing game for that one game. Not really fighting for their playoff lives, but still kind of in that mix. That's kind of where everyone thought they were going to be. So for them to at this point, at this stage in their rebuild as a franchise, from the grit and grind era, already be a team to watch out for, or not even a team, a contender, a legit contender in some ways. That's kind of really hiding him there. And I don't talk about Giannis so much because obviously I'm biased being Greek, but definitely love him too as that third guy in the MVP race. Voter fatigue might play a role. Hopefully he still gets his due in terms of votes to where he's still where he deserves to be, whatever that ends up being by the end of the season. But those 6 guys you mentioned, you got it right on the money with that one. Those are the 6 that we should really be looking at. And those are the 6 that as the weeks come down, we'll be, drawing straws to figure out who's on top of who.
I mean, that's basically what it's going to come down to, man. I mean, maybe we have to draw straws or flip a coin or draw names out of a hat. I mean, I'm not sure how you kind of make that decision. Honestly, this year, I'm glad I'm not a voter. I don't have a vote in this process, because I'd be racking my brain trying to figure out where I want to place these guys on my final ballot. So good luck to all the voters out there for everybody that has a vote. It's going to be a very difficult process. But, something that's a little easier to kind of digest and a little bit easier to kind of make a final verdict on is just really how potent this Harden and Embiid fit has been so far. Looking at how they've done so far. In their last game, Harden was a DNP due to hamstring tightness or hamstring management, whatever you want to call it. He did not play in that game. But in the 4 previous games that Harden and Embiid played together, absolutely phenomenal. They won all 4 games. They were on a 5-game winning streak previous to last night. Previous to their last game that they lost against Miami. And looking at how those two have been kind of, working together, it's been seamless. I think Embiid has really had to make a slight adjustment. All he really needed to do going into this partnership with Harden is change how he operates the pick and roll. Because historically, we go and look at how he operates in that action. He likes to pop a lot. He's very willing to shoot, especially at a guy his size. But I think he's been a little bit more willing to kind of dive to the rim, because he knows that's what Harden has done. He finds guys on the roll. Ask Clint Capella and guys of that caliber. You're going to get easy buckets when you roll to the rim. And Embiid has been a great recipient of those beautiful James Harden passes through the legs, around the back. I mean, he can do it all, the pocket passes. And so many times you'll see Harden or you'll see Embiid right at the rim off a pass. All he has to do is turn and lay it up. That's it. He doesn't have to take a step or dribble. It's just Harden is so good at putting guys in spots to succeed. It's really incredible. And Harden himself has dialed back his scoring, his usage when he's playing with Embiid. He knows that Embiid is the focal point. He's the guy. So Harden is willing to maybe, instead of being like a 28 point per game kind of guy, he scales down to maybe like a 20, 21 and builds the assist and gets Embiid involved. So kudos to both of those guys, how they've been so far. Yeah, it's only 4 games, but They've been incredible. They've been so fun to watch. So that's my takeaway. How are you feeling about those two together? I mean, do you think they would actually work this well, just this quickly, or were you like me and thinking it would take a little bit more time to kind of gel to this level?
I'm going to go a step further. You're asking about the two of them. I'm going to go the three of them and throw Tyrese Max into the mix because they're now they almost look like a big three with how well he's been playing and how well they've incorporated him. But going back to your question, of course, as fun as it is to kind of talk about how dangerous they look and how well they fit together, I was a little bit uneasy because of just how and I've heard Howard Beck, who was on our show a little while ago, he was talking about this on his show a couple days ago, how Harden, this is what Harden does. When he's super motivated, he's an MVP caliber player. He's an all-time great player. He's going to come in, he's going to ball out. He has a chip on his shoulder now. He has to prove everyone wrong, that they were wrong about how he wasn't playing well in Brooklyn or about how he gained weight. Same thing in Houston, right? He had to really come in, and his first few weeks in Brooklyn, he was killing it. So all that stuff is true, and he's going to be playing really well. But the fact that he's able to mesh so well with Embiid, and they've played about half as many games together as he had with the entire KD and Kyrie Nets. So he's almost already eclipsed that. So that's kind of crazy to think about it at the same time as, how we've already seen 5-6 games of them. But in that time, winning games, playing really well. They lost to Heat last night, but other than that, winning 4 games in a row, playing really well. I want to pull up some numbers here that I saw earlier today in terms of the big three, because I know I mentioned them earlier. In their first game, the three of them combined for 89 points. Second game, 87. That was against the Knicks, another W. Then 78 in the third game and 80 in the fourth game. That's literally, they're basically combined. They're averaging like 26 points per game each almost at that point. Like sometimes one of them have 30, 35. Another one, an off night for Maxey was against the Heat having 17. Like that's kind of the scoring output they're getting used to. And the fact they're all doing that and not giving up shots and and the percentages aren't going down is crazy. So if they can keep that up, I'm really, really, really high on the Sixers team actually making some noise because they look sound in all aspects. Their spacing is good. They're not terrible on defense. And they actually have a really good shot of keeping, if they can keep this, honeymoon phase going into April, May, who knows?
Yeah, who knows, man? I mean, honestly, just looking at how they've meshed so far together, I mean, I think the main reason they can get their shots even after this trade is because what other options do they have as far as like reliably generating offense? You may think Tobias Harris, like, oh, he's the guy. Obviously, he just hasn't been there so far this season for him, not consistently anyway. So, after that, it's just like spot up guys. I mean, there's Thibault, but defenses don't really respect him when he's beyond the arc. Georges Niang, I mean, Furkan Korkmaz. I mean, you go down the list. I mean, these guys aren't generating offense. Seth Curry is out of there, so they need people to kind of continually maybe get them good shots. So it brings it back to those big three. They can continually just get their shots because after that, it's a big drop off. So those three are going to continue to get a lot of shots, a lot of great looks, and they're all playing off of each other so well. You go look at Maxey's numbers, and this is, I think, before the Heat game. So it's like in 4 games prior to, the Heat game. But I mean, he was putting up 27 points per game on 64 from the field, 70 from 3, and 86 from the free throw line. Those are the 4 games since James Harden came to that team. So obviously they're all benefiting from each other. And then you mentioned James Harden being motivated, like the key being when he's motivated. When he wasn't motivated, he was only shooting about 33% from 3. His 2-point percentage wasn't anything to write home about. It was only at about 47%. Flip the script. He's on a team that he feels good about. He's inspired. He's motivated. 50% from 3, 68 from 2. Even his assists are up by 2, went from 10 assists in Brooklyn to 12. Now, some of those numbers are going to come down, it's only 4 games, but you can see clearly the difference in Harden's mindset and his impact. He goes from being like a pretty good player back to being like pretty elite. Now that he's with a team that he feels really good about and wants to be there. I'm not going to get into the whole conversation about like, should he have been in Brooklyn more motivated or should he have forced his way out? That's a conversation for another day. But as of now, I mean, it's working out so well. And honestly, I think they have as great of a chance as anybody to make some noise, as you kind of mentioned before. So I think their only thing that could really do them in is if any one of those 3 guys has an off game in the playoffs, it's going to be really tough to make that up because it's just the next 2 or 3 guys after that are just not reliable. Even Shake Milton hasn't been that great this season. He hasn't been consistent. So I just worry a little bit. If any of those three guys get hurt, it's over. If they have an off game, it's going to be really tough to make that up. But otherwise, if they're all clicking, they're really tough to beat. I mean, they're absolutely elite, and they can make a run in the playoffs, just assuming that everybody stays on their toes and everybody's playing up to their normal game. So I can't wait to see how they progress and how they kind of gel, especially once we get into playoff time.
It's going to be a lot. And we've been talking about all these great great teams, whether it's MVP led teams or teams that are just really gelling together. But there's a bunch of other teams that we were talking about before. I know if you kind of brought it up, how they might not be contenders, but there's still some teams that we need to look at, because whether it's their seating for the draft, whether it's their draft slot, and what they and their future outlook, their salary cap positioning for next year and the years to come, because they have so much room to operate with. I mean, you kind of brought it up at the beginning, whether it's the Pistons, Magic, the Rockets, Thunder. These are teams that have draft picks galore. They have draft picks from the teams that we just mentioned, who kind of went all in. Like, what are some of these teams? Why should we be watching them as fans? What do you think about that?
So I really got this inspiration by Nekias Duncan of Basketball News. He really gave me this idea based off of an article called Views from the Bottom, What to Look Forward to from NBA Non-Contenders. Basically what he did, he highlighted a few players from these teams that make them worth watching, because from the outside looking in, maybe to a casual fan, you look at the Rockets, you look at the Pistons, you look at the Magic, the Thunder, and you say to yourself, why would I watch these teams? I mean, you look at the standings, it's like they're at 16 wins, 17 wins, 15 wins, 20 wins. They're not competing for the playoffs. Maybe you should just mail it in and just wait till next year when they get some nice picks in the draft and maybe tune in then. But I would say that would be doing yourself a disservice if you kind of write these guys off. They could still play spoiler. They could still go out there and, win any given game if their young guys are on, because they have a lot of talent, each of these teams. Now, Houston, I wouldn't give them a great chance to play spoiler. As of today, they've lost 12 games in a row, 0-10 in the last 10 games, so that's not great. But regardless, I think when you look at the guys that they have on their rosters, like Jalen Green, Cade Cunningham, Markelle Fultz is another guy. He just came back from injury. These players make these teams intriguing. So even though they won't win many more games this season, they're not going to be on national TV all that much, I think they still demand your attention, especially if you're a diehard fan, because you look at these guys, maybe they start their ascent this season, and then next season they really kind of take it to the next level. So these could be the building blocks in the last 15, 20 games to getting to the point where they're an established star or a guy that is on national television and is making waves. So I would just say, check them out. You never know. They could have a nice little streak in the last 10 games or so. And then before you know it, next season, they're all-star, borderline all-star. They're a real, serious, up-and-coming star in this league. So I say give them a shot. You never know what you'll see, even in the last 10 or 12 games where these guys are out of contention and they're just basically jostling for lottery balls at this point.
Definitely. And the fact that there's so many teams that are still relevant to be watching at this point of the season is really cool. And that's why I like the fact that they extended it to, we were talking about teams that maybe won't be even in that play-in race. But the fact they kind of did that is just really made it to where you're going from looking at 16 teams all season long to now you're really looking at all 30. Because instead of just looking at the best playoff teams, the worst teams, you're looking at almost everybody in some way, shape, or form. And the fact that you're mentioning, how we should be looking at these non-contenders, even though they're not as exciting as some of those other teams, they still have what's exciting about them isn't so much their wins or the amount of points they score. It's the potential of how they can win a lot of games and the points they can score. So kind of getting on that train from now is really cool. And we've been mentioning, a lot of these teams maybe that were in disadvantaged positions that aren't really contenders and what to make of them. There's some teams that, are still kind of running afloat, but they're about to get a lot better really fast. These teams we're mentioning might need to take a draft cycle or two to really get into doing that. But there's a couple players in the league that have come back from injury on teams that are contending for titles or teams that could be if these players come back into their old self. One of them I know is your guy Victor Oladipo from the Heat, and there's a few others too that I can't wait to dive in on. But just starting with Oladipo, he's coming back. You told me before this that you have information coming from sources that he's coming back tomorrow. So yes. How big is that going to be for your squad?
John, I think it's going to be absolutely. It's going to be a huge deal, honestly. Me, fellow Heat fans, the Heat organization have been just really holding on to each piece of news we got throughout the season. First, it's like Oladipo, it's indefinitely. Then it's like in 2022. Then it's in February. Then it's March. Then it's 2 weeks. And then it's Monday. And I think I heard that back on Thursday of last week. So apparently it's going to be tomorrow. They play Houston. I think that's a great game for him to come back. He did play with the Rockets for a short stint last season. And then Houston, like I mentioned before, they're coming off of 12 straight losses. So I think it's a pretty good squad. I don't want to disrespect Houston and say it's a warm-up game, but it's a great game for Oladipo to kind of get his footing under him, play maybe 15 minutes. I'm not sure what the minute limit will be for him. But Oladipo, I think his main impact is not going to be from offense, although he is a very capable offensive player. It's really going to be the defensive end for him. He only played 4 games with Miami last season before he sustained another injury. But in that time, he played almost 28 minutes per game. Not crazy, nothing crazy from the scoring column. His percentages were not great. But what I witnessed was his impact on defense. And you go back to last night, obviously the Heat do defense very well. They held Joel Embiid to 6 of 15 from the field. He had a really rough shooting game. Miami is capable of some absolutely outstanding defensive games. The Sixers only scored 82 points. That was the lowest scoring total for a Heat opponent since 2020. I think what I saw was January 2020. So that's absolutely incredible from that standpoint. But Oladipo is going to bolster that defense for the second unit, because you look at their first unit, Bam, Tucker, Lowry, Jimmy, across the board, all fantastic defenders. But then once you get to the bench, you're looking at Tyler Hero, you're looking at guys of that caliber, maybe Max Strus, who's not terrible, but you throw in Oladipo to that mix, another very capable defender. Miami's that much more stout. And then I think in certain matchups, he will close games as well. So you can throw out 5 players for Miami that are actually above average defensively, and then 2 guys that are actually like all defensive team material. So they're going to be well suited to make some noise in the playoffs. They're going to be able to grind it down, play slow, battle games out, get some stops, and they can match up with anybody. They can switch. They can play any kind of defense. So I think from that standpoint, he's going to be incredible. He doesn't have to do much from a scoring standpoint. They have plenty of scoring. Tyler Hero is averaging, over 20 points a game off the bench. So Oladipo, all he has to do is just pick his spots, be a good cutter, a good spot-up three-point shooter, and just play really great perimeter defense, and he'll be right at home. So I'm really excited to see him, what he can bring to this team. I know another couple of names on this list, John, that we have are MPJ and Murray. Those guys have been out for a while. So I want to hand this over to you. And, what are you most excited to see from these guys as it pertains to Denver? I mean, they're good already, but think about how much better they're going to be once these guys are back. They're actually dark horse contender, possibly, if these guys are 100%.
I would take out dark horse and just put contender on them, because with them being the 6th seed now, right? And sure, there's a lot of games with the West. It's kind of a little bit more spread out than the East, where like one game can separate you from 1 to 6. In the West, it's a little bit more. But still, you add those 2 guys who are not just max contract level players and above that, but just talent wise, right? Really important pieces of this lineup that just allows Jokic to do so much more, and it allows everyone else to do so much more around Jokic. I don't want to be the team that sees them in the first round. If I'm the 3 seed and the 6 seed. Or if they're the 4 and the 5, I don't want to see that team in the first round for sure, because they're not that seed. They're a 3-2 seed in the West. If these guys are playing the whole year, if not, I mean, the Suns obviously have a big margin wins wise over everyone else, but they're right there with everyone. If they have those 2 guys back who are just really just stellar players. So getting either one of them back or both, I don't think it matters so much when. There's so much space with all these games in the playoffs. They're kind of locked in. They're not really going much higher than 6 or much lower than 6 at this point, unless something really drastic happens. So I would just say if they come back when it's playoff time and it's winning time in the first round, sure, they need some tune-up games, but other than that, they're really going to make that team scary. And another team that's lost some. This was kind of more of a midseason thing, but with the Bulls losing Caruso and Alonzo kind of at inopportune times, that they were one of the best backcourts in the league, because number one, defensively they were so stout. Right. But that was obviously a big portion of that. But also they just allowed DeRozan so much more space offensively to kind of operate. With those 2 guys coming back, maybe the Bulls might beat some teams that are over 500 or that are top 7 teams in the league. Maybe that'll happen. So that's exciting to think about, how 2 teams that both are still kind of scary for a lot of they're still a tough beat during the regular season. One team has who probably should be the MVP in Jokic, and the other team has DeRozan, who's just putting up numbers like you wouldn't believe scoring wise, really breaking records that haven't been touched since MJ was with the Bulls. Those two guys, these guys come back to their teams are going to be really, really, really special. And there's a lot of ways, and these are teams that are surefire playoff teams. And we really haven't spoken about teams that aren't in the playoffs that might be getting guys back, because they're normally, right, if you're out of the playoffs at this point of the year, you're probably gonna send it in. But the Pelicans are surging right now. We spoke about this a little bit off air because we're talking about how Zion might come back at some point. He's been delayed all year. He's supposed to come back in November. Then it was December. Then it was maybe he'll have another surgery. And now we're getting word that he's actually at least in New Orleans right now. Which is really surprising and exciting for that franchise. So if he's able to come back on a team that right now is on a tear, you have the CJ McCollum trade that went down. He's putting up he's almost putting up 30 a game for them since the trade. So with that kind of thing happening, you have to be excited if you're a Pelicans fan, because this team went from a 12 seed to now they're inching into a surefire playing spot, if not, maybe securing themselves into a home court playing game. If Zion's able to come back and really put them over the top, like he did when he was playing last year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, this goes beyond just Pelicans fans. This is a win for the league, because Zion has been marketed and kind of pushed as that face of the not just the franchise, but the NBA. The next big thing. He was in so many nationally televised games last season. I mean, he just drove so much media attention by himself. The fact that he might be coming back, it's still in the year. We're not really sure right now. But if he can come back, I mean, that just kind of changes the fabric of the playoff race in the West, because he put up 27 a game last season, a really high efficiency for a guy that's had barely played a whole season worth of games. I mean, that was absolutely incredible. And I'm going back and I'm looking at the numbers for New Orleans over the past 2 weeks, and these are numbers from Cleaning the Glass. They are fourth in offensive efficiency at 120 points a game. And then defense, this is stunning right here. I did not see this coming at all. Number one in defense over the last 2 weeks, holding teams to a paltry 94.7 points per 100 possessions. I mean, John, is that good, man? I think that seems pretty good to me, right? They're doing something right, obviously. So that just blows my mind that bringing in CJ McCollum. I honestly think just making that trade and getting a guy like CJ, I think it bolstered their confidence, because they knew that you're getting a bona fide scorer, a guy that could put up 24, 25 a game, great efficiency. Brandon, it takes ease off of Brandon's shoulders. It takes ease off of Valanciunas' shoulders. And it was almost like they just hit the reset button. It's like back in the day, if you have one of those consoles, like you have an N64, you have a PlayStation or something, and if something is just kind of off about it, you just sit there and you hold the reset button for a few seconds, just do a hard reset, like on your smartphone or something. And it's like it's a new device. It was stuttering, it was lagging, and now it's just completely like transformed. So I'm really just stunned at their defensive, just their toughness right now. That is stunning to me. But in any case, it's going to make things interesting. And I want to throw out this question, because I talked to my friends about it last week. Do you think if they match up with the Lakers, let's say it's the 9-10 matchup in the play-in tournament, if AD is back, are you taking the Pelicans? Let's say Zion does not come back. Let's say he's still out. Are you taking the Pelicans in that matchup, or do you think the Lakers will have enough with LeBron and AD to get over that hurdle?
That's a big question. I was already thinking about I was thinking about the offensive side and CJ and all this stuff there, and really just like impressed by all the stuff they're doing. I'm thinking about that, and now throwing the Lakers in there. I just finished watching LeBron drop 56 points last night, so that's kind of tough to kind of say that this Lakers team really is as washed as everyone's been saying they've been all year. But they definitely have their problems. The Pelicans look really good right now. The Lakers have looked terrible outside of last night. Man, that is a great question. You really got me with that one on the spot while we're doing the show. I would have to we're talking one game for all the marbles.
Just one game. One and done.
Can I ask one? Who's at home? Who do you think?
It would be it could change, but I think it would be we really have to see. I think as of today it would be the Lakers, but I think it's actually because right now I think the Lakers are
9, Pelicans are 10. It's a game between them. Yeah, it's not even that much.
Let's say it's the Lakers. Let's say the Lakers have home.
The Lakers even have home court. I still might have to go to the Pelicans.
Okay. Okay.
The only thing that stopped in terms of like who's the better run team, who's like that's just like really good. They have better vibes to them than the Lakers do. At the same time, thinking to myself, if the Lakers have one game, just the amount of talent that they have, can they go to the level that we think they were at? That's the one thing that's holding me back a little bit is can the Lakers do that? Have they shown it for one game this year that they can collectively do that? Not really. But I'm thinking, if it's the playing game, maybe they'll flip that switch. Who knows? But as of right now, I'm going to leave my answers to the Pelicans. Maybe the Lakers prove me wrong because we might really well see that very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll play the devil's advocate. I'll go the other side and pick the Lakers. I don't know. I think just after watching LeBron last night, it just kind of showed me, like reminded me, it's like I can't count out LeBron. If he just needs to win one game, all he needs to do is just drop. I mean, it is tough because you saw last night they barely won that game. He dropped 56, and they just narrowly beat the Warriors. But just give me one game with LeBron, and let's say A. Davis is back. I think they have just enough to get past the Pelicans. But I think it would be a really good game, and I think it would be a really close contest because, like we're talking about, the Pelicans are not just an offensive team anymore. They can get stops, and that can be the difference between the Lakers making it or stumbling from there. So, yeah, I mean, one more name as far as who were. I guess we discussed these guys before, but you go all the way down the list, and I think there's a good balance between offensive and defensive guys like Oladipo, Alonzo Caruso for defense, MPJ, Murray, Zion will bolster their offense more. But I mean, in any case, I think all these guys, I want to see them back. I want to see them whole because I just want the respective teams to have as good of a chance to get in as possible. I don't want to see anybody hamstrung or kind of limping into the playoffs. So we'll have to monitor that situation to see how they do. But while we're talking about the Pelicans and Zion, I mean, this kind of brings us to something we wanted to talk about here for a while. It has been a minute since we've been on the podcast, but we didn't really have a chance to discuss those trades that went down around the trade deadline. So I guess we can discuss while we're on the Pelicans, the CJ effect, the McCollum effect. It's been absolutely amazing to see what he's done for that team. And, I wasn't really expecting him to go off to this degree. I knew he'd do well, not like this. How do you feel about that trade? Roughly 1 month later, maybe a little less, but a decent sample size now to kind of watch these guys on their new teams.
Definitely. We've seen close to 10 games now of all these guys on their new teams. And we broke it all down when it happened. The initial reactions from Howard Beck, Michael Grange, all these right big time reporters on what they thought about how the trade went down at the time. And we kind of had a feeling that, when guys get to see new places, and these are trades that for many of these teams happen with non-playoff teams, right? I mean, or non like real contending teams, like the big, like the Lakers that, like, for example, everyone thought they were gonna make a move, not they're a contender, but like kind of these teams that everyone's kind of got under the microscope, they didn't make a move. And everyone was kind of waiting for that. And you have teams like the Pelicans who are fighting for a playing seed, and you have teams like the Pacers and stuff, and teams like that making all these moves. The Pelicans we're talking about, of course, Zion and him coming back. CJ, and I'm gonna round down the points. I think I can round up the rebounds and assists by like 0.1, 0.2. He, as of right now, he's averaging 26, 6, and 6 over the course of 9 games for the Pelicans. Those are really good numbers, and they're winning games. It's not like those are empty stats. So he's actually really contributing to them making that surge. With the pieces around him, that's obviously really, really uplifting. But the fact that the Pelicans maybe took a little bit of a risk kind of going into that and making such a big that's a big time trade to make, but it kind of helped them back twofold almost. Everyone kind of was really critical about the Blazers making that trade. Obviously, CJ is a bucket, and he's proving it now with the Pelicans. So that's a really big one. And also, we were talking about this off air, and other kind of you break up one backcourt. In Portland, another backcourt kind of got broken up in Sacramento with De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton splitting up. But both of them are playing great in their new cities. De'Aaron Fox is really coming alive. Sabonis is who we expect him to be in Sacramento. Right? He's a great big man. He's an all-star caliber player. He's going to put up his numbers. But like De'Aaron Fox was the guy that everyone thought he could be if he was let loose, and he kind of has been. Same thing with Halliburton. He's playing well with Indiana. So kind of seeing all these new faces, new places, or guys that stayed in their spot, but now their roles kind of changed. Maybe same face, same place, but a different role. They're all kind of playing a different style of basketball, and for some of them, it's looking pretty good.
100%, man. Tyrese Halliburton, I want to give some focus on him because I'm still in shock that they actually dealt Tyrese Halliburton. And I don't know. I'd be sick if I was a Kings fan because you go and look at their draft history. You look at the Jimmer Fredette's that they drafted. I mean, you go look at all these guys, Thomas Robinson. Marvin Bagley the third. I mean, all these like draft bust. They finally find a good developmental piece, a guy they can invest in for the long term, and they trade him away after 1.5 seasons. It's just kind of still blows my mind that they actually made that move. But I digress. But looking at what he's done for the Pacers so far, just really impressive stuff. I mean, he's a natural playmaker. I think his natural role now is a secondary scorer. Because you look at his scoring numbers, I mean, he's not the guy. He's not a volume shooter. He's not going to demand a bunch of shots per game. He's really content just to kind of like set the tone and just set the plate for other guys. Similar to like maybe like a Kyle Lowry. Because you look at Kyle Lowry, he's not a guy that's going to just put up crazy scoring numbers. He's going to be efficient. He's going to be more than willing to make plays for other people. He's going to do the little things. Halliburton, he has put up 2 steals a game since he's been in Indiana, along with almost 10 assists per game. Just dynamite stuff from him in the midst of an Indiana season that's been kind of a loss for them, near the bottom of the East. But he's been a real bright spot for them. So I think losing Sabonis does hurt a little bit. It definitely hurts in the short term. But long term, I mean, the Pacers are in a great spot. Him plus Brogdon have been an excellent backcourt. They complement each other really well. And, Halliburton is just – I'm looking at his shooting numbers, just really impressive stuff, man. Like, I didn't realize how consistent he was. Even though he has one of the ugliest jump shots in the league, in my opinion, he's been consistently around 41% last season and this season, before and after the trade. So, I mean, if you're looking for someone that's just consistent, that's just going to be there every game, make the right plays, not cause any issues, just go about his business and get things done, you can't really beat Tyrese Halliburton. So excited to see where he goes from here in his future. But as a second-year guy, you can't really ask for much more. So Pacers fans have something to look forward to, because I know the win-loss column has not been in their favor so far this season.
Definitely. And so many other trades that were noteworthy, but, we're still waiting to see kind of how those play out. And a lot of them, right, most of them have to do with this offseason, clearing up cap and, right, position themselves, which people can find all on our website in terms of how teams are doing that to position themselves, which we'll know that later on. These were maybe some of the more big cannonball moves of the deadline, where big-time players are being moved, and they're playing on the court right now, and they're looking really good doing it. Obviously, the only trade we didn't touch on yet, we mentioned at the beginning, was the Harden and Simmons trade. We kind of already spoke about how Harden and his fit with Embiid. Maybe by the next time we get on the show next week, Simmons will play, but I don't think he's going to play on that March 10th game against his former team.
Nah,
that's not looking likely at all. So that being the case, maybe though the week after we can maybe come on the show and talk about his debut. But until that happens, that'll still be kind of in limbo on that front. But other than that, make sure all our listeners are looking up at our website to see how all those trades, how all these players returning from injury, how all this stuff maybe adds up and is going to lead to one of the best finishes in recent memory.
Absolutely. And as we wind this thing down, you bring up Ben Simmons, and it just kind of brings me back to something I keep thinking about. We're both in agreement that he probably won't play that March 10th game against the Sixers. Just highly doubt that. It came out recently, just a couple of days ago, that the back issues, whatever that is, that he had previously are worse than they thought, previous to the trade. And obviously that takes care of the March 10th game. You won't be in that one. But I just keep thinking, like, I wouldn't say he's faking this injury. I wouldn't want to say that. But like, what if this is something very minor, that it's just like, hey, this game is coming up. It's convenient that, maybe he could play, but he's a little not quite 100%. Hold him out, because, like, I don't know, the way they phrase it, it's bad. So he'll be out for a while, but I'd be willing to bet that he's back in 2.5 weeks, something like that. How do you feel about that? It's just something I keep thinking about. Maybe I'm just a hater of Simmons. I don't know, but
I can see it's not so much like making it like faking it, but in the sense of like making it seem like it's a really big deal now, as if it's going to be a month, because we know he's not going to be out for that long, because that would be pretty bad for the team. He'll probably be back before that. But just seeing how they go about and how it's really all about perception and the media PR side of things. So they're going to say certain things, give him some time. He wants to come back when KD and Kyrie are next to him, when Kyrie can play every single home game and they go on a 5-6 game win streak. That's what he wants that narrative to be. Not that, Ben Simmons debuts, that Ben Simmons is going off. that's kind of, or that the Nets are rolling. So until that's a guarantee, and there's a great chance of that happening with KD being not just back, but back and healthy and playing like his normal self, Kyrie being cleared to play all home games, and then Simmons saying, you know what, I'm ready to go, and this team's ready to go. That's when he'll come back, and that's when he can make, hopefully for him at least, and for his sake, a real splash in saying that, you know what, I'm not the guy you saw in the playoffs pass the ball with trailing under the rim. I'm better than that, and we'll see if he is.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to see it. I'm just disappointed that he's still kind of dealing with some issues that are kind of keeping him off the court. It's just weird to me because he hasn't played in so long. He hasn't been on the court since that last game against the Hawks there. Doesn't seem like he's been doing much. I mean, could have happened during a workout. I don't know. I'm just throwing out theories as to, why he's out or how long he'll be out. Just curious because he hasn't played in so long, and now you see it's a back issue. I'm just like, well, where did that come from? But that's just me thinking out loud, I guess. We'll have to see what happens there. Hopefully, he comes back pretty soon. But I think that concludes our podcast, guys. We thank everybody again for tuning in, to this episode. Of course, we have resources for everybody to check out. So if you're watching this via video, we have all our resources on the screen. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, our website, notradeclause.com. It's all there for you guys to check out. We have our cap sheets. We have our draft capital, transaction log. We have articles going up all the time by our fantastic writers. So please check those out. And then, of course, this podcast will be getting out episodes as much as we can. Scheduling can be tough sometimes, but we are working as hard as we can to bring more episodes to you guys in a timely manner. So we'll be back with more great guests, more conversations. John, always a pleasure jumping on with you here, man. It's been a great time. Glad to be back at it. And we're just getting hyped for this playoff push. So, in the meantime, check out our website and keep it locked here for more podcast episodes. But until next time, everybody, take it easy. Enjoy the rest of this season, this playoff push, and we'll be back in action real soon. Take care, everybody.